So there's two videos I have on book reviews in this module. The first one I want to go over a quick slides, some overview slides of what book reviews are, the way they're structured. I'm going to draw on a few of the readings that I'm asking you to do for this week. I think there's 3 articles I'm having you read about book reviews. They're all very short. If you haven't read them yet, you will see the information I'm giving you be repetitive to what I'm saying. Although the 3 articles have different perspectives. One is a literature review on how book reviews have been written, or some suggestions about how to write book reviews. It's kind of interesting, actually. So some of the methods and results section you can skip a little, just focus on the intro and discussion in those. But there's 3 articles total that will give you some different ideas of how to structure your book review on top of the article that is called The Anatomy of a Book Review, right? That kind of goes into detail of how to structure it. Because when it comes to book reviews, there really isn't there is one basic structure. I'm going to point this out. But on top of that, there's some freedom in how you can write this book review, and you can actually put in a lot of your personal thought and critique in there. As a matter of fact, you should do that. That's the purpose of a book review. So let's talk about the purpose. It's, the main purpose in the grander scheme of things is that there are ways to share knowledge effectively and swiftly, right? Because if we all would have to read all the books that are always published in a particular field that we're interested in, it would be very, very laborious and time-consuming and probably impossible to do all that. So book reviews are a great way to still get an idea what the book is about without having to actually read it right away. Book reviews in general provide readers with a detailed write-up of the book's arguments and contributions, and they also provide, of course, a critique of the shortcomings and an emphasis on things well done. And critique is really essential here. Let me switch the color here. That looks weird. Critique is really important, right? Because the book review, if you're just summarizing what the book is saying, that is not the point. It's not a summary. It's a review, so you have to provide some judgment, some analysis, some interpretation, really some personal reflection on what did you think about it based on your credentials and understanding of the field. Often readers use book reviews to determine if it's worth their time to read the entire book. Certainly guilty as charged. And you might be familiar with the New York Times review of books. So there are book reviews of popular books, not just books in scientific or academic journals. I'm focusing mostly on academic journals here, the book reviews that were published there. But book reviews in general are a great way, again, to communicate about large bodies of knowledge. Book reviews tend to dominate fields with a monograph or book, right? Monograph being a different term for a book, where that is still a dominant form of publication. And in my field, in American history and American studies, that is certainly the case. Usually most folks will only get tenure in my field if they have published a book and then there's a second book and so on. Although that is changing some as well. Articles are becoming more as important, if not as important, then more important as well, and they're important for the tenure process. But in science and scientific writing, you'll find people can have a wonderful career without ever having to write a book, right? I mean, it's totally normal and expected. But again, there are some reasons why scientists, I think, could also benefit from writing more book reviews. There's there's an article I put in recommended course material that you can take a look at if you have some point. I think it's a really neat piece. So that's the major purpose of the book review, and ultimately, didn't include this here, the purpose of a book review is to present not just summary, but analysis and critique. And critique both in a positive and negative way, right? So it's not just about a critique, but also an emphasis of things well done. And you'll find this more and more in book reviews. Rarely will you find somebody being very scathing about it, although that happens too. But in general, people are very positive in book reviews. The writers of book reviews tend to be as positive as they can be in their reviews. So let's talk a little bit about how book reviews come to life. How do they happen? The selection process. So often publishers and editors of academic journals are the main drivers behind book reviews, particularly publishers, right? Because it's kind of free advertising for them. I think one of the articles talks about that. So it's free advertising if a book that is published in your publishing house is being reviewed somewhere. So publishers often send sample copies to journal editors, and those editors then send those books out to authors whom they have worked with. But there's also the opportunity, especially if you're a novice writer or graduate students, for graduate students to contact the editors of journals, right? To contact editors of journals and ask, hey, this is my field of interest and this is a book I would like to review. You might even want to tell them, hey, there's this book coming out. I'd like to review this for this journal. Would you be interested? So book reviews, because they're not such a high-stake publication, they're not peer-reviewed. The editor usually only reviews them, and that's sometimes only briefly. So they're a great way to get, publication on your resume, get your feet wet. So it's a nice way to do that. So based on this process, book reviews in academic journals are written with a particular audience in mind, right? It's the readership of that journal, and I think it's really important to remember. It's different than the New York Review, book review in the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever. They usually appear on the weekends. Or you probably have if you have to get the paper still, the actual paper version of the paper, like the physical paper. There's an insert on Saturdays, I think, in the Post at least. I used to love reading the book reviews. One of my favorite genres, as a matter of fact. Love writing them, and I love reading them. So anyways, but with our context here about writing for academic journals, I want to really focus on, and I'm going to show you 3 examples, 1 in this video and 2 in the other video, of book reviews that are published in scientific journals. Because they're very genre specific, they're very audience specific, which means that you might not have to explain as much, or you don't have to explain too many too many jargony kind of terms, because the audience reading it will be familiar with the terminology. Although in general, book reviews tend to be very jargon free, because they usually address larger issues than just a very specific field, specific study that you would, as you would find in a journal article. So let's talk about the general structure of book reviews, because there really is sort of one template that I want to say 99 point whatever % of book reviews fall into. I have not found book reviews that don't fit into the structure, even the ones that review more than one book, which happens sometimes. And one of the examples actually is a book review of 2 similar books. So there's 3 main sections. There's usually the first paragraph, sometimes 2 depending on the length, that offers usually a brief summary of the book's main topic. Some background info about the author might be included, could also be later on, but it's often can be in the first paragraph. It's a great way to start off as well. And there might be some reference to the overall genre and context, right, to place this book in a larger context of why it has been published. And we'll see some examples of that as I go through some of those 3 sample book reviews that I have included on Blackboard for you guys to look at as well, which if you haven't looked at them yet, it's okay, you can look at them later. I'm not going to review every single paragraph of all the book reviews. I'm just showing some of the major sort of rhetorical moves and structural elements in there for you guys to know of, and so that you can start building your own book review and model it after any of those if you like, or just at least know what's out there. But that's sort of, the first paragraph usually that sets the context for the book review. The main body paragraphs, and that's usually a few, depending on the length of the book review, depending on the length of the book review is supposed to be. This could be 2 to 5, 6 paragraphs. Rarely longer than that, unless again you're writing a book review about several books. Then they're usually a little longer. But these body paragraphs offer a detailed review of the main points raised in the books. Sometimes they go chapter by chapter, sometimes they highlight certain chapters. Again, different models depending on the genre of the book that's being reviewed. It might be a textbook, it might be a more narrative book. And again, depending on how much room, how many words the book reviewer can use for their book review. The last paragraph can include a variety of things, but sometimes what I see a lot is some personalized recommendation or commentary, right? The critique you will have throughout the main body paragraphs, and they can sometimes be very explicit throughout as well, not just in the conclusion. So don't feel you have to hold back until the conclusion. You can write yourself, so to speak, into the text, into the book review, throughout the book review. But at the end, you certainly will have that sort of overall verdict of the book, some concluding remarks, and this could be predicted effect of the book in its field, maybe how it relates to current political situations, which could be the case depending on the topic. So kind of like a what's next type of attitude in that last paragraph. But again, three main sections. Oops, the color changed here. Three main sections is really what we'll find mostly in book reviews. Okay. So let's look at, before we look at some examples, I want to show two slides, two different tables from one of the readings. This is the reading by Lee Green Johnson and Nyquist from the Chiropractic Education Journal, a journal of chiropractic education. And I really like their simple table here, the recommended strategy for crafting a book review. So they also have first, main text, final, right? So I borrowed that language from them because I really thought it was pretty straightforward about how book review is structured. So in the first paragraph, you capture the reader's attention, you outline the aims and scope of the book review, of the book mostly. The main text, a variety of things, describe the central ideas, key arguments, discuss strengths and weaknesses of the book, highlights the book uniqueness, notable contribution to the field. And again, all these things can be happening throughout all the paragraphs, depending on how you structure it. And then the final is sort of, I like the way they phrase it here, balance the book's achievements and weaknesses in order to support the final assessment. So the final assessment comes in the final paragraph. So again, very straightforward structure, right? Nothing surprising, but it's a good, if you put your final assessment in the first paragraph, that might be a little bit too much for the reader to take in at this point. So they need a little bit of more context before you can do that. But again, you are weaving in discussion of strengths and weaknesses throughout the main text, the body paragraphs. They also include what I like, a list of desirable and undesirable characteristics. So we're going to look at desirables first and then undesirables. And I want to just point out a few of these. The criticism should be substantiated and constructive, right? So that's some of the, based on this literature review, these authors have done of how to write scholarly book reviews. This was something that came up in a lot of these suggestions. I also, important, it provides a good critique of theory in the field and the place of book within it. It doesn't have to just be of the theory in the field, just a general critique of the book, and in the context of the field. And it pinpoints the strengths and weaknesses of the book, right? So it's really not just a summary. I think that's my major point I want to make. It's not a summary only. The summary goes into the first paragraph, right? Very quick summary of what the book is about. Main body, it's really about analysis. Analysis, critique, interpretation, assessment. Assessment is probably a good term to use of what you'll be doing mostly in your book reviews. An assessment of the book based on your experience, your background, and your reading of the book. And then undesirable characteristics is sort of the opposite of that. This is, merely a chapter by chapter summary. I see this a lot when I work with undergraduates. I ask them to do a book review, I give them all the material, I walk them through it, and then I just get a summary. Could be caught, and I'm saying this because, not to be snarky, but it's hard to move from summary to analysis, especially as a novice writer. That's why I usually have my undergrad students rewrite their book review at least once, because the first time they tend to be very hesitant to make any quote unquote value judgments. So don't be that way, and I'm sure you're not, because you're, based on the writing I've seen from you in 603, I'm definitely not have that concern. But I do want to point out, don't just stick with the summary. It's really about, again, assessment, right? So if assessment is missing, that's pretty undesirable. Same thing here, review of the book's content, but no critique. So if you just tell me what's in the book, but don't provide me an assessment, I might as well not read your review, because I want to know if it's good, bad, or, quote unquote good, bad, or anything in between. And really, is it just good or just bad? It's usually, much more nuanced assessment, of course, than that. And then some other things here. I don't know what this use overworked, non-original cliche statements. Yeah, some people always say this in sort of writing tips, and I'm never quite sure what they mean. But again, avoid cliches, I guess. I can't give you an example right now of a typical cliche for book review. Doesn't mean that you can't use certain phrasing that you see in another book review, so keep that in mind as well. So let's look at some examples. So this one is the book review by you, and it's about I think it's a compendium about craniofacial embryo genetics and development. That's a mouthful. And it's a very short book review. It's 4 paragraphs. So I included all of them actually in here. But it follows the same structure. The first paragraph, this is a very nice, comprehensive, updated compendium for dental and medical students and residents, as well as practicing healthcare professionals, blah, blah, blah. In this 3rd edition of the treatise, the scope has expanded to include more genetics. It is such an important addition. The shift textbook now has a modified title with insertion of a neologism, which I can't pronounce, obviously, embryogenetics. So in this first paragraph, 3 sentences, right? Three sentences, very briefly, I get an idea of whom this book is written for. It's a 3rd edition, and also that it's actually well done, right? There's some value, some assessment already present here, which is great, but not too, it's not too detailed, but it gives me an overview of where the author is going with this. So really well done. Then the main text, there's 2 paragraphs, and there's two sections. So each of those 2 paragraphs for that main body, for the main text, is dedicated to each section. The book has 2 sections. Section ends at this, and then the second one, section 2, is the longer of the 2 sections, and focus on this and this and this, and it gives all the examples what it does. It doesn't provide too much detail. Again, it's a shorter book review, but it gives sufficient examples of what it's doing. Okay, and then here comes then the full assessment. So the previous paragraphs are pretty descriptive rather than analytical, and that's okay because the assessment eventually comes here. And I find the assessment phrasing here just actually delightful, just like the author is using the word. I find this delightful textbook well written, logically organized, effectively illustrated, and full of very useful information, balancing the normal with abnormal developments. One may question the utility, so there is a critique, but then this authoritative and yet very rapidly, let me see, so authoritative reference book provides editorial control and validation that are often missing in the wild vastness of unrefereed internet. So again, 3 short sentences, quick assessment, short book review, does the trick. I didn't count the words of this one, but I think your book review needs to be longer, so you probably will have to have more than 4 paragraphs. So again, and as I said in my intro video many modules ago, the lower end of the book review guideline for word count is kind of a non-negotiable, but in terms of if you run over at the upper end, don't run over by like 200 or 300 words, but if it's anything up to 100 words, it's okay.